Welcome back, On Guard Army. Today we are going to be going over my NAIC list, now that I am back from NAIC. I feel like this list is super solid, however my matchups at NAIC were not. In 6 rounds I happened to hit 4 Lugia, and Lugia is very much a toss-up, and if you win a game and lose a game against Lugia, most of the time it's going to go to time. So, before we jump into the list, let's go over how my tournament ended up going. I went 2-2-2, so I had 2 wins, 2 ties, and 2 losses, which unfortunately puts me out of range of day 2, so instead of playing it out to try to make a couple of points, I ended up just dropping and spending time with friends at NAIC, trying to make the most of my weekend. But in round 1, we ended up hitting a Lugia player. I lost game 1, won game 2, and then game 3 we unfortunately were not able to finish, because unfortunately those games take a while, especially with how much damage is being spread and how many actions are being used by Lugia per turn. Then we hit a Lost Pult player, and we went loss-win-win against them, so we ended up winning that set pretty solidly. And then round 3, I hit a Lost Box player. I lost to them game 1 because they hit turn 2 Sableye into knocking out Pidgey Dreepy, and then I couldn't really establish my engine game 1. Game 2, I won solidly, and game 3, we unfortunately went to time. It was 2 prizes on my side of the field, 5 prizes on their side of the field on the last game of time. Well, last turn of time, words. And I unfortunately whiffed a 2-prize knockout for game on their Blood Moon off of my Kieran being literally 10 short of knockout, which was so unfortunate. But they ended up taking the tie, so we ended up going into a tie bracket at 1-1-2, and then I ended up hitting 3 Lugias in a row past that point, which was not great. I ended up winning 2-0 against the next Lugia that I faced, fought against another Lugia where I won game 1, lost game 2 because I didn't see a singular candy for the entire game. I had to manually evolve up into my Dragapult EX. And then, unfortunately, in game 3, I started Radiant Charizard and went attach, pass, get donked. So, sometimes there are games that you don't really get to play. Then, in the following round, round 6, I ended up hitting another Lugia player. Super nice guy, by the way. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he was a super nice guy. We ended up going... He won game 1, I won game 2, and then game 3 went to time. He was up on prizes by the end of turns, so I ended up giving the win to him, because another tie would knock us both out of day 2, so I thought at least one of us could continue our run. So with that in mind, I will say I think this deck has a lot of good matchups across the board. I do think Lugia is a toss-up. It tends to be a 50-50, definitely better in a best of 1 against Lugia, but better in a best of 3 against anything else. I played Radiant Zard because I was hoping to hit... Well, I played it for the Raging Bolt Ogerpon matchup, which normally is a bad matchup, but with Radiant Charizard, if we can swing twice with Phantom Dive into swinging with Radiant Zard, most of the time we will win those games. So, because of the Radiant Zard, I felt confident going into Raging Bolt Ogerpon matchups. Unfortunately, I didn't hit any of them, and I only hit Lugia, because I would rather run into multiple Raging Bolt Ogerpons and lose fast or win fast than go to a game 3 and end up not actually finishing the set. That's just my opinion on that, but that was the reason we were playing the Radiant Zard. So overall, I think this list is great, and let's start going over why I played what specifically I played. So I played Dragapult EX because of the Phantom Dive attack that does 200 damage and spreads 6 to our opponent's bench. This is some of the most oppressive early game damage you can get. By turn 2, for 2 energy attachments, you are swinging for a net 260 damage, which is absolutely insane. The fact that you're not necessarily taking knockouts with this attack early means that you can set up for some huge multi-prize turns and be able to swing the game while letting your opponent go ahead on prizes in the early game. This means that you can Iono or Counter Catcher them to be able to set them back while also being able to put specific Pokemon in specific areas and be able to take crucial knockouts on specific turns, rather than playing into other Unfair Stamp, Iono, or Counter Catcher plays from your opponent. We are playing 2 of the Drakloak instead of 3 of them because we are also playing a 1/1 Bibarel, but this has the ability Recon Directive, which lets us look at the top 2 cards of our deck, put 1 into our hand and 1 on the bottom. This also, being a non-rulebox Pokemon, means that we could swing with Dragon Headbutt for 70 into our opponent's active Mimikyu, meaning that we actually have a built-in Mimikyu counter into our Dragapult EX, which is our main attacker. We have 4 Dreepy because we want to find Dreepy as quickly as possible to be able to establish our Dragapults. And then we have 2 Pidgeot as the main engine of our deck, because being able to search out 1 card from our deck every single turn means that we are going to pretty consistently be able to do what we want to do every game as long as we get a Pidgeot established. We also are playing 2 of the Call for Family Pidgeys, because this helps us to establish our board. For example, if we only have a singular Ball Search out, or if we just have a Pidgey, we can still establish our board to some degree. For example, if we start a Lumineon or start a Radiant Charizard, we could potentially go Kieran or Turo as our supporter for turn to be able to pick up the Radiant Zard and go into Pidgey to attack with Call for Family, instead of needing to manually retreat. Or we can Arven for Rescue Board to get out of the active with one of our 1 retreat cost Pokemon into Pidgey to Call for Family. This won't necessarily be our optimal turn 1 attack, because a lot of times we will want to Grasping Draw to be able to refill our hand, but this is great for if you don't see a lot of Ball Search in your early game. We have 1 Bibarel as some good mid-game draw. This allows you to refill your hands against people who are using Unfair Stamp or Iono or something like that. This lets you just refresh your hand, draw into one of the few combo pieces that you may need, and then you can search out the other piece with Quick Search. We also have Cleffa because it is a free retreat Pokemon that also has an attack for no energy that lets you draw until you have 7 in hand. So once you use something like Ultra Ball to grab Lumineon, play Arven for Buddy Poffin Forest Stone for another Buddy Poffin and get your entire board set up, you can then go into your Cleffa and Grasping Draw to refill your hand to be able to more easily establish both a Pidgeot and a Dragapult on the following turn. We have 1 Lumineon because it makes that play a lot easier. Most of the time at the very beginning of the game, you are going to want to play Lumineon for Arven to get your setup, and 4 Ultra Balls makes it easier to do that. And since we're playing 4 Ultra Balls, it allows us to pare down our hand a little bit easier to draw more cards off the barrel. We have 1 Manaphy because we don't want to be Greninja'd and have our entire engine destroyed. Granted, if they are able to pull ahead and get a very early Sableye, it does make this a little bit more awkward. But if you establish a Bidoof and a Pidgey as well as a Dreepy, well, you'd need 2 Dreepies established, because otherwise they just knock out the 1 Dreepy. But if you establish 2 Dreepy, a Pidgey, and a Bidoof, they can't remove all of your draw, because then you can evolve the Bidoof into Bibarel if they choose to knock out Dreepy. The only other thing that they can do to really stop your engine is knocking out Pidgey Bidoof, but in that case you have 2 Dreepies, and one of them could evolve to Drakloak, while the other one can evolve up into Dragapult. We also have a Radiant Zard for, as I mentioned, the Raging Bolt Ogerpon matchup mainly. Otherwise, I would say that it might be a good idea to play Radiant Alakazam as well, because you can move some damage around and fix some math. But as long as Raging Bolt Ogerpon is relevant, I think Radiant Charizard is going to be very important, because although it is possible to get 2 Dragapult established in that matchup fairly easily, it's very difficult to get a 3rd one established, and being able to have a basic Pokemon that you can just go Attach Swing after you've done your 4-prize Dragapult turn is super useful in that matchup, instead of needing to establish a 3rd Dragapult. We have 4 Arven because this will be our optimal turn 1 supporter. We really need this to be able to function, so Arven for Buddy Poffin for either Rescue Board or Forest Seal Stone to be able to get our board established is super nice. We've got 2 Iono because this is our 2nd most important supporter, but we also have Palpad to be able to reuse these things. Iono will be disruptive in the late game, but if this happens to also be our turn 1 supporter, it's not bad just seeing an additional 6 cards. We also have Mela for mid-game acceleration, so after we swing with our Neo-uppered Dragapult in the early game, we can be able to Mela to attach a basic Fire Energy card from our discard pile to one of our Pokemon, and draw until we have 6 in hand, and then we can attach a Psychic and be able to swing with our next Phantom Dive. We have Kieran because it is both a switching effect and a damage modifier. It's actually insane to be able to swing for an extra 30 with Kieran. For example, we can go, if they are ahead on prizes, we can go Defiance Band and Kieran to hit up to 260, which, if they are up on prizes and swinging with Blood Moon Ursaluna, you can actually knock it out in one hit with Kieran plus Defiance Band. We also have Turo's Scenario, which allows us to pick up one of our Pokemon. This is great for clearing Lumineon off the bench if we have to play it in the early game to stop our opponent from being able to take a big swing turn off of a 2-prize liability. Or if we start Radiant Charizard, it's super nice being able to pick it up with Turo. We could also theoretically, if we've swung with Radiant Zard and they want to leave it in the active and spread to our bench, we could either Kieran or Turo the Radiant Zard, play it back down, attach another fire, retreat into it, swing. So we can sometimes reuse Radiant Charizard just because we play both Kieran and Turo. We also have a Boss's Orders. This is not going to be our only Gust, but it'll be our only supporter Gust in this deck. We can also reuse it with Palpad, but our main Gust throughout the game will be Counter Catcher, which is also searchable off Arven. And since we want to go behind on prizes in the early game to be able to set up multi-prize turns, I think 2 Counter Catcher is better over 2 Boss, and to play 1 Boss just as like a universal Gust at any point in the game, I think 1 Boss is completely fine here. We also have a Cyllene. This is flip 2 coins, put a number of cards equal to the number of heads from your discard pile on top of your deck in any order. This allows you to, if your opponent enhanced hammers your Neo Upper Energy, you can Cyllene, put it back on top, draw into it off of Recon Directive, and then attach and swing again. This is really good for if you swing with Neo Upper Energy and don't have another energy in play, and they choose to enhanced hammer your Neo Upper and then hit your Dragapult without knocking out, preventing you from being able to use Mela. This allows you to actually swing with another Phantom Dive back to back. This is why I really like Cyllene here, but it also opens up some other plays. For example, being able to use Lost Vacuum twice in a game, being able to put back Palpad against Control, so you can go Cyllene, put back Palpad, draw into Palpad, Palpad back in either Turo or Kieran and your Cyllene again, and then continue to loop these cards. I really like Cyllene here. I really do think it is an interesting tech here. I will say that I did get the inspiration from Andrew Mahone, aka Tricky Jim, so shoutouts for that one. It did come in handy at NAIC for some of the games. I do wish that I hit a little bit more than just Lugia in the weekend, but tournaments will be that way. Sometimes you'll hit matchups that you don't want to hit. Let's continue onward. We've got 4 Buddy-Buddy Poffin. This is going to be our main setup. It grabs us all of our basics aside from Lumineon and Charizard, which is fine because normally when we are grabbing Lumineon or Charizard, we are going to be using either Charizard in the late game, or we'll be grabbing Lumineon to hand to play down to use it to search for a supporter. So we wouldn't be wanting to search for Lumineon off of a Buddy-Buddy anyway. Then we've got 1 Feather Ball. This is a more interesting tech, but I do really like it. It is able to search our deck for a Pokemon that has no retreat cost, reveal it, and put it into our hand. This is great for being able to grab Cleffa if need be, because it has no retreat cost. So turn 1, it actually does give us a basic that we can put down. Or, it can also grab us on turn 2, the Pidgeot that we need to evolve into. For example, if we go Arven for Feather Ball and Forest Seal Stone, we can Forest Seal Stone onto the Lumineon, Feather Ball for Pidgeot, Candy into Pidgeot, and then use both Quick Search and Forest Seal Stone to grab another Candy and our Dragapult to be able to evolve up into our Dragapult. I really do like the Feather Ball healer. I know some people are playing a Hisuian Heavy Ball just to be able to grab one-ofs. I think that the Feather Ball is generally more all-purpose here, and it's great for not needing to discard down your hand just to get a Pidgeot. This lets us get an evolution Pokemon for free rather than discarding 2 cards from our hand to do so, so I really like the Feather Ball in this deck. We have 4 Rare Candy because we've got 2 different Stage 2 lines that we want to get into, and we want to see it as frequently as possible, because if we see one of them, that means we can search for the other one off of something like Arven or Quick Search to be able to get into both Pidgeot and Dragapult on a singular turn. As I said before, Counter Catcher is our ideal Gust, because we are going to be going behind in prizes on the early game, as we need a turn to set up, and we are normally going to be spreading around damage and not necessarily taking knockouts in the early game, being able to target down specific attackers is going to be great with this deck. We've got one Earthen Vessel because we are playing a multitude, or multiple different types of energies. We're playing both Psychic and Fire, so being able to discard a card from our hand to find both a Psychic and a Fire is super good. It also thins out 2 cards from our deck, which are cards that we will not be drawing into because they're in our hand now, unless we're being shuffled back into our deck off of like Unfair Stamp or Roxanne. But being able to grab both a Fire and a Psychic so you can attach one and then on the next turn be able to attach the other makes it really easy to get into our Phantom Dive, even without the use of Neo Upper Energy. We've got one Lost Vacuum for being able to remove tools. This is also super relevant against Raging Bolt Ogerpon because they do play 2 to 3 Bravery Charms. Being able to remove them means that you will be able to take those multi-prize turns on the turns that you want to. Or at the end of the game, they might just have a Raging Bolt in the active with 290 on it because of a Bravery Charm. You can go Lost Vacuum and then swing for 250 with Radiant Zard, which is also absolutely great to be able to do. We've got one Super Rod for being able to put back any of our pieces. For example, if we use Lumineon in the early game and it gets discarded or knocked out, we can Super Rod it back into our deck, Ultra Ball for it, bench it, be able to grab the specific supporter we need, and sometimes that can be a game-winning play. It also lets us shuffle back in our basic energies for us to be able to find again to be able to set up other attackers. Sometimes we may need to discard too many energy in the early game and may need to put them back for the late game, so we might put back like Fire, Radiant Zard to be able to use Radiant Zard in the late game. That's definitely come up a few times, but Super Rod is always just going to be good resource management in general. As I said earlier, we've got a Pal Pad here to be able to reuse our supporters. This also enables us to, against control, be able to just loop Cyllene and a switching effect, so we're never really going to be stalled unless we hit double tails off Cyllene. I like this a lot. I definitely wish I hit a control deck at NAIC because I felt super confident into the control matchup, just due to the addition of Cyllene and Pal Pad. We also have one rescue board. This is a great pivot option. When one of our Pokemon is at 30 HP or less, it gives it free retreat, which is nice, but also it's just -1 retreat cost to anything else, which allows anything on our board except for Bibarel and Radiant Charizard to retreat for free. So if we had rescue board on Bibarel, we could attach an energy and retreat out of it in a single turn if they were to try and gust and stall our Bibarel. The only thing that kind of hurts is the Radiant Zard here, because if we start it, we can't just retreat out of it. We kind of have to either Turo Kieran or attach twice and rescue board to retreat. That's been like the only thing that's been kind of annoying about this deck is the Radiant Zard starts. I don't even care too much if Lumineon is our start, because it means that if we have an Arven in our opening hand, we still get 2 search cards out of it, because we can grab Buddy-Buddy and Forest Seal onto Lumineon and grab another Buddy-Buddy to fully set up our board. I actually don't mind starting Lumineon, but I hate starting Radiant Zard. I think that's the only thing about this deck that kind of frustrates me, is whenever I have those awkward Rad Zard starts. We've got a Defiance Band, so when we're behind on prizes, as we tend to be, we're doing an extra 30 damage. That extra 30 can be super relevant for setting up math for multi-prize turns. For example, if we swing with Defiance Band into a Raging Bolt that has a Bravery Charm on it, we're swinging 230, meaning it has 60 remaining. So, as we are putting damage onto our opponent's bench Pokemon, we can then, after that, gust up another one of them, put 60 onto the one that we did 230 to, and knock out the previous thing that we already spread to. Meaning that we are going to be doing a 4-prize turn, allowing them to then take a knockout on Dragapult, and then we promote Radiant Zard, attach an energy, and then swing for game. That's why I definitely wish that I hit more Raging Bolt. We're just getting into me venting at this point now, though. And then we've got one Forest Seal Stone. This is just a search for any card once per game, so since we have Lumineon, we can Lumineon for Arven, Arven for Forest Seal and another piece, and just have that second piece at any point in the game. Sometimes, if I only establish one Pidgey, or if they manage to KO both of my Pidgeys, or I prize a Pidgey or something, Sometimes I'll just be able to establish a Dragapult on the next turn, just with the use of Lumineon. Sometimes I'll literally just be able to go Lumineon for Arven, Arven for Arven for Rare Candy Forest Seal for Neo Upper, and I'd already have like an Ultra Ball or a Dragapult in hand, and then I'd be able to Candy up into Dragapult, attach Neo Upper, and swing, and sometimes I'd win without even needing to use Pidgeot, which is super nice. We then have a Temple of Sinnoh, which I know is a little bit counterproductive with Neo Upper Energy, but against Lugia we need to be able to turn off multiple energies at once, and this is the only real way to do it. I considered also playing Enhanced Hammer in addition to it, which might have been better for the field that I ended up hitting at NAIC, but Temple of Sinnoh ended up being a great way to kind of turn the Lugia matchup into a bit of a 50-50. Being able to turn off both Mist, Legacy Energy, and Gift Energy all simultaneously made for a variety of different plays. I would sometimes be able to beat a Lugia just because I was able to go attach Fire, attach Psychic, evolve up, and then go Iono Temple Knockout without them being able to draw cards. It was always super nice to be able to do something like that, not necessarily in the early game, but in the later game, if you have a well-timed Temple, you can sometimes just win the Lugia matchup. Then we have 3 Fire Energies, 3 Psychic Energies, and 1 Neo Upper Energy as our Ace spec. This is a card that provides 2 Rainbow Energy to any Stage 2 Pokemon. And since Dragapult is a Stage 2, this is the easiest way for us to be able to Phantom Dive easily. So if we miss a turn 1 attachment, we can always just go Neo Upper onto this and be able to Phantom Dive for a singular attachment. That's why this is the optimal Ace spec for this particular build, and why I'm liking it a lot for this deck. I think that this deck is insane, and I'm sorry that this is a little bit more of a long-winded video, but I wanted to kind of go over all of my thoughts about this because I've put the most time into this deck recently, more than anything else, so I wanted to share all of my thoughts possible. I hope you like this video, I hope you enjoy what I hope is good insight about this deck, and I will catch y'all later. Leave a like and subscribe below if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next video.